President Trump's Twitter tantrum about President Obama's wiretapping him is a lot of things. Alarming. Certain people would certainly argue unpresidential, and to this point, it is unsubstantiated. And this Politico article says it also shows, quote, a shocking lack of understanding of how the American legal system works. Former Obama advisor Ben Rhodes agrees with that, tweeting the following, quote, no president can order a wiretap. Those restrictions were put in place to protect citizens from people like you. And when he says like you, he's referencing our current commander-in-chief. Well, the man who also wrote that Politico piece, he joins us to explain. Bradley Moss is a partner at the law office of Marcus Zaid, and he's done extensive work on intelligence cases, and he's kind enough to give us a few minutes. Bradley, thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to help you.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First, let's go through what I just read from Mr. Rhodes. Is it right on the surface that no president can just order a wiretap unilaterally?
It's very much correct. With very limited emergency exceptions, yes. To order a wiretap, whether domestically or for foreign intelligence purposes, you're going to have a court order. Now, what Donald Trump is most likely referencing is these various media reports that have come out over the last few months that there may have been a FISA warrant authorizing collection of information and possible surveillance of either him or some of his associates and possibly some of his financial records. There was an article that came out on the eve of the election that claimed that there was a full FISA warrant authorizing surveillance of 4 Trump associates and that the FISA court had concluded they were agents of a foreign power. That would obviously be a very significant issue. It would mean there must be far more to the story than we currently know. The alternative is what's come out through other articles in BBC and McClatchy, which is the idea that this is a far more limited FISA warrant, that it's simply relating to certain financial records tied to certain Russian banks that may have been coordinating with Trump associates. And that wouldn't have required that same kind of significant evidentiary burden of probable cause to conclude U.S. citizens were agents of a foreign power. That simply would have had to demonstrate that there was a pending counterintelligence investigation.
And Bradley, historically, can you point to one instance where a president directly requested FISA to get involved? It always goes through the FBI, doesn't it?
Correct. It always goes to the FBI and the Attorney General. And no president since FISA was enacted in the 70s has generally been involved in it because, by and large, in the aftermath of Nixon-era scandals, the White House and the Justice Department keep themselves separated. If you're in the White House, you're not supposed to be interfering or jeopardizing or poking your nose into whatever the FBI and the DOJ are investigating, even if it implicates you. So, yeah, in the last, 40, 50 years, there has been no president who has done that. There's no indication that was done here. There's no indication that Donald Trump himself was ever the subject of a FISA warrant, whether a more limited one or the more full-fledged one that's been alleged against certain Trump associates. If anything, it involves maybe some of his associates, such as Paul Manafort and Carter Page, but there's no indication that Donald Trump was ever wiretapped.
Okay, so we did the how and the who, or the what, I should say. Let's do the who. Already, some of the principals directly and through third parties have said, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about, including a spokesperson for President Obama. You have reportedly Comey, we saw the front page of the Times today, saying, we didn't do anything to do with this, and you, DOJ, Justice Department, come out and say something. To this point, they haven't. And we also saw Clapper come on and say, I don't know what you guys are talking about. It would have come through my office. I didn't see anything about it. So that means one of two things. One, he extrapolated something because he doesn't understand the civics. I'm talking about President Trump. Or two, he made it out of whole cloth. Which do you think is more probable right now?
I think he took it from this Breitbart article that's been floating around for the last few days. It summarizes musings by Mark Levin, who's a constitutional attorney and now is a big radio personality. It kind of stretches a lot of very circumstantial evidence to try to make conclusion that there is a full-fledged FISA warrant on Trump Tower, which simply didn't happen. I mean, this is what I was trying to say in the op-ed in Politico. There are very nuanced aspects to what's required to get a FISA warrant in general. The president is now the president and now controls this government. It would behoove him and the country in general if he started to educate himself on how this works and how President Obama, no matter what he may have thought of President Trump when Trump was running for office, President Obama could not just call in the Attorney General and call up the FISA court and say, give me a warrant today. It does not work that way.
And Bradley, if Trump was, and he said definitively, so we don't do any nuanced after the fact like I've seen some of the spokespersons do for him. He said definitively he was wiretapped, and he was wiretapped by Obama. To that point, if he had anything of any evidentiary whatsoever, he can declassify it. He's the president now. He doesn't need to look to anybody else. If he wanted to right now as we speak, he could have a press conference, he could declassify whatever else he wants and show the smoking gun. We have radio silence instead out of Washington.
Correct, because there is no evidence, because he doesn't have any. This is, we've seen this throughout the entirety of this presidency so far. We're 6, 7 weeks into this, and we're going to see it for the next 4 years at least. But the president will read something, and he will indicate that he knows it to be true, and then when it gets cleaned up and spun through his various spokespeople, it's, well, the president believes this to be true. He doesn't require what the rest of us would view as, some kind of substantial evidence in order to reach a conclusion. He sees it, he believes it, and that's the end of the discussion for him. And I think that's what you're seeing here, and that's why in the aftermath of the tweets and the backlash from the national security community, that the revised explanation that came out on Sunday morning talk shows from Trump people was, well, he's calling for Congress to investigate it because he has nothing. And yes, if he did, there is nothing, no law, nothing that would stop him from today calling a press conference at 3 o'clock, holding up the FISA order and saying, see, I've got it right here in my hands. Here's the order that was tapping my phone. There's nothing that would stop it.
And finally, Bradley, under any permutation here, and there's 2, potentially 3, this is bad for President Trump. One, if it turned out that he made it out of whole cloth, that further, you would think mitigates his credibility and hurts him with both intelligence agencies that have an investigation as we speak with his Russia ties right now. 2, if he is right and the feds actually got wiretap because they have probable cause to investigate him, that means there could be something potentially very damaging. Or 3, finally, if you follow the last crazy 45 days, if there's any kind of methodology to this, they tend to go on the attack right after something else is about to drop. So no matter what, with what he did over the weekend and with that tweet storm, it's either embarrassing or it's potentially leading to something really bad for him, not the former president.
Correct. This is a lose-lose, and you got to have to wonder what on earth, due respect to the president, what on earth he was thinking Saturday morning, starting this whole furor over the question of whether or not there's a FISA warrant. Because if you're right, if there is one, that's serious, and that means there's far more to this story than we currently know. If there was enough for the government to demonstrate to a FISA judge that there was probable cause to conclude 4 Trump associates are actually agents of a foreign power, namely Russia, that means there's far more details that are going to come out. There's going to be far more intersection of finances and contacts between Russian government officials, particularly intelligence officers, and Trump associates. That means he's got a whole lot more negative stories coming out in the next 6 to 8 months in the New York Times and the Washington Post that are just going to damage him more and more as he's trying to get through his first 100 days, which are supposed to be the honeymoon, which is supposed to be when he gets everything done. And no matter what comes out of this, whether there is a warrant or not, I completely agree. This has damaged him one way or the other. How badly, only time will tell.
Bradley Moss here. Thank you for trying to make some sanity out of the insanity. I appreciate the time.
Happy to do so.
All right, everybody, coming up next, we're going to take a close look at how the sausage is made and how fringe ideas and right-wing websites, they turn into, well, what we just saw, presidential tweets that set off the political firestorm we find ourselves in.